Coming up this afternoon on the marketplace, Bank of Ghana warns of tougher sanctions against players that breach Forex market rules after suspending the foreign exchange trading license of Consolidated Bank Ghana for 1 month. We shall be discussing the implications of the suspension on Consolidated Bank Ghana with a financial analyst. Meanwhile, Bank of Ghana expresses concern over the sharp rise in non-performing loans in the banking sector.
Banking industry's non-performing loan ratio increased from 18% in September 2023 to 22%.
Later on Let's Talk Tech segment, we shall be exploring how the U.S. cryptocurrency and Ghana's ECD will be competing favorably on the currency market following the re-election of Donald Trump as a U.S. president. We have details of this and more lined up for you. Please stay. Thanks so much for your time. I am Pius Kojo Baka. So that big story we are following up for you. The Bank of Ghana has indicated that it will not hesitate to heavily sanction players that breach its Forex market rules. It is coming after the foreign exchange license of Consolidated Bank Ghana was withdrawn for a month effective November 26th. There is more in the following report.
The Bank of Ghana also noted that it took the action because it wants it to serve as a deterrent to other market players. It is therefore cautioning them to strictly adhere to the applicable Forex market regulations and guidelines in the country. Joy Business is learning that the sanction is linked to the recent action taken against global remittance giant TapTapSend over the creation of a CD wallet for remittance without the necessary approval. Therefore, if TapTapSend have been sanctioned, then their local partners should also be sanctioned as well. We're also learning that the action against Consolidated Bank Ghana will not take immediate effect, but from November 26, 2024, and will last for 1 month. This is because the Bank of Ghana did not want the action to have an immediate effect on their operations, but rather give them some time to temporarily close their operations. According to the Bank of Ghana, it also took the action because Consolidated Bank Ghana breached a number of foreign exchange market regulations. The license, according to the central bank, could be restored at the end of 1 month, and if the regulator is satisfied that the commercial bank has instituted an effective control when it comes to foreign exchange market regulations.
All right, so based on this sanction, Consolidated Bank Ghana will, from November 26 to December 26, will not be allowed to undertake any foreign exchange transaction. And this means it cannot buy, sell, or carry out these transactions for any institutions during this period. And my colleague George Yafi joins me in studio to help us understand what more is picking up from the bank. Thanks so much, George, for joining me in studio. Exactly what are you picking up from the bank?
So what we are picking up in terms of those who have knowledge, as in what transpired between the Bank of Ghana and Consolidated Bank, is that this action that the Bank of Ghana has taken is actually linked to the action that the Bank of Ghana previously took on this TapTapSend situation, that the bank, that is the remittance giant located outside the country, created a CD wallet, in which Consolidated Bank Ghana actually was acting as more of like a local rep in allowing these remittance players outside to actually send money into Ghana. So we also understand that BoG actually officially wrote to Consolidated Bank asking some questions. Consolidated Bank also went ahead to supply necessary answers, thinking that because they thought the argument was that they were not complying with the required KYC requirement. Consolidated Bank also thought that the player outside that is sending the money in their local jurisdiction was complying with the required regulators' restrictions in terms of KYC and all those things. So they thought that was not a problem. They did all the explanations to the Bank of Ghana, only for them to be written again that these are the sanctions that could likely be taken against them. And this happened in the space of just about 2 or 3 days. So that is what we are picking up from those who have knowledge of what has transpired between the regulator and Consolidated Bank Ghana.
And I know unofficially you've been engaging the managing director and etc. How worried are they? And are they worried that, well, this is likely to affect the operations?
And yet to get the MD on this particular issue. But again, if you speak to those who have knowledge of what has transpired, they are surprised at the action of the Bank of Ghana because they were in the process of engaging the regulator, thinking that with the explanation that the bank has given, that is Consolidated Bank has given, that could have excused them from any action, only for them to hear this announcement on radio of this particular issue that because of XYZ, this is the action that the Bank of Ghana is taking against you. And if you appreciate the remittance business, this could be classified as their cocoa season because leading to Christmas, these banks who would act as local reps will be receiving a lot of money. And if you look at their interest income, they'll be making a lot of money as well from these remittances that are going to come in. So stopping them from doing this, some will say it might not be good for the bank in question. But again, if you also engage Bank of Ghana, they argue that the action is not taking immediate effect. It's going to take effect from 26th of November. And they believe that during this period, Consolidated Bank would then be able to wind down and lessen the huge impacts that will happen on the operations going forward. So they are surprised, actually. If you engage those who are close to the bank, they are surprised by this action, but they believe that they will continue to engage the regulator to ensure that, listen, get a better understanding that we actually complied with all the requirements when it comes to remittance and all those things, and therefore going forward, maybe any action that could be taken against them could be less. Because if you go through the Bank of Ghana statement, they say that after the 1 month, Bank of Ghana is going to go back and actually see whether they've actually put in place the required actions to ensure that they can review that sanction on them. So it's still early days to say that, because at the end of that period, in the 7th of December, automatically that license will be restored to them.
And the good thing, George, is that we have Eli Komla Abloyo for some conversation on the back of this. Thank you, George, for joining me. Thanks so much, sir, for joining us on the matter we are discussing now. Swift move by the Bank of Ghana suspending CBG for breaching its Forex market rules and also against remittance giant TapTapSend, you think?
Okay, so good afternoon, and good afternoon to your listeners and viewers. So first of all, let me laud or congratulate the Bank of Ghana for taking action. I think that we need to see sanity in the financial sector. We've had the banking sector crisis and crisis in other sectors of the financial system or financial markets. So it's important that they have taken action. I listened to your conversation with George. I'm a bit surprised that he's saying that the bank wasn't aware that the central bank was going to take this action. If that indeed is the case, then the Bank of Ghana probably needs to improve the way it communicates with regulated entities so that they are aware of the action that is being taken against them before it becomes public. So that's my first point. So having said that, I think that, of course, not knowing the details of what has gone on, there may be a number of ways that the Bank of Ghana would have approached this. So, for example, they're giving CBG warnings and that if this continues, we'll suspend your license. So that's in the first instance.
And I'm wondering, maybe you want to conclude that for me quickly.
Yes, in addition, they could have fined them, right? So instead of suspending the license, they could have fined them. I've read the Forex Exchange Act. It has some provisions, including allowing the BoG to suspend the bank's license, among other conditions that the BoG may impose. So instead of suspending the license, they could have fined CBG, or they could have asked the bank to implement controls and monitor and see how those controls actually evolve. Because the implication of suspending their license is not just on the bank, right? It can actually affect the customers of the bank. What this means is that if you're a customer of the bank, you are expecting remittance inflows, you want to do a foreign transfer, etc., you cannot do this. And I don't think that the customers of CBG should be punished for the actions or inactions of the bank. So if you ask me, there may have been other ways to approach this, like I've mentioned, warnings, fines, putting in place continuous monitoring systems, etc.
Well, indeed, the Bank of Ghana in their statement didn't indicate whether they gave, forewarning to that effect. But how would you see this playing out in terms of operations of CBG, and how much do you think that they have time to correct all the anomalies, given the timeline given?
Okay, so I think that this doesn't take place immediately, so they should have time to put in place better control systems. It's going to affect their operations because they can't transact in the FX market. They can't send funds abroad. They can't receive funds abroad, both for their proprietary accounts and also for the accounts of their customers. So I think that is going to have a huge impact on CBG. Like George mentioned, we are expecting more remittances towards December when we are getting to Christmas. Those abroad will be sending money to their relatives back home. So it's going to have a huge impact on the bank, as well as the customers of the bank.
So, which means that customers who have, FX accounts with them are likely to be impacted as well.
Yeah, they are. I have actually personally suffered from this. One of the bank's licenses was suspended a few months ago. I was their client or customer. I was expecting an FX inflow. I didn't get that money until the license was restored. So that's why I have a bit of a worry that in seeking to correct misbehavior in the financial system, customers of the bank should not be unnecessarily punished.
All right. So what sort of message do you think that the suspension sends to the banking community and, of course, our quest to boost confidence in the sector?
So, well, I guess that the central bank intends this to be a warning or a poster child for members of the banking sector that if you don't go according to the rules, you will be sanctioned or your licenses may be withdrawn. But as I've argued, there may be other approaches, better approaches. Again, I'm very particular about the fines because if you find a bank, the effect could be the same. And you can actually find a bank and ask it to contribute to a financial stability fund, because anybody who contributes to making the financial system unstable should pay for it, right? What we call systemic risk. So if the bank is not obeying the FX Act, they should pay for it. That's my opinion. The current approach unnecessarily punishes the customers of the bank.
And this is likely to have an impact on the confidence of the city as well, I guess.
Not to, if you ask me, not to a large extent, because you can actually transact with the other banks. So CBG is just one bank. So I don't think that it should have a huge effect on. Yes, there will be an effect, but it will not be significant.
All right. Thanks so much, sir, for joining us here on the Marketplace. Professor Elikple Mabloya, a financial analyst and, of course, a lecturer as well, for that matter. Thanks so much. We appreciate your time, sir. Now, let's stay a while longer at the central bank because they have expressed concern over the sharp rise in non-performing loans in the banking sector. Second Deputy Governor, Dr. Elsie Aduawaji, said the industry's non-performing loans ratio threatens to derail progress within the sector. She, however, said the BoG is committed to implementing measures to reduce the high non-performing loans and mitigate risk.
Banking industry's non-performing loan ratio, which is the ratio of loans that are not performing compared to overall loans that have been provided by the banking sector, increased from 18% in September 2023 to 22.8% at the end of September 2024. So this is just 1 year, the migration in 1 year of the NPL ratio. And I must add that this has resulted in banks having to write off some 63.5 million CDs in bad loans. And this has happened by the end of 2004, September 2004, just compared to September 2003. So there are costs to non-payment of loans. These costs are primarily borne by the balance sheets of the banks and the SGIs who lend, but ultimately these costs are borne by depositors whose funds are used to provide loans to the public. So this is always something that has to be borne in mind. And this state of affairs is unsustainable for the banking industry because it impairs their solvency and in no time leads to insolvent banks. It increases risks for depositors. My deposits, your deposits are at risk. This leads also to a situation where banks and SGIs shy away from lending to genuine businesses.
More on money matters. Chief Executive Officer of Dalex Finance, Joe Jackson, says it does not expect the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Ghana to reduce its policy rate. This explains is due to the marginal increase in inflation for the month of September and October 2024. Speaking to Joy Business at the Bank of Ghana Stakeholders Forum on Collateral Enforcement, he said the marginal increase in inflation for the month of September and October is alarming.
Look at the inflation rate, which is rising. That should tell you immediately that is this. First of all, any further reduction will not happen. What will most probably happen is there will be a hedge to say, let's hold and see what happens. Remember, the inflation, the food inflation is rising in September. Now, that should scare you and I, because September is one of the periods where the harvest has happened, things should be much cheaper. If food inflation is happening in September, what will happen in February? So, we are not expecting that they will reduce the, they haven't tamed the beast yet. And remember that even referring to our earlier discussion about high rates, the rates of inflation we have in this country also make for the high rates that we charge. All round. Because who will give you money if inflation is going to wipe out this money? So you have to give somebody a return that protects the person against inflation. That return that protects the person against inflation is a very high rate. Then you have to charge an even higher rate. So, listen. As for the MPC, we're not expecting rates to go down. And that's because of the inflation.
Welcome back to the marketplace. Let's Talk Tech is next. Today on Let's Talk Tech segment, we want to explore how the US cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and of course Ghana's ECD, which is yet to be rolled out fully, be competing favorably on the currency market following the re-election of Donald Trump as US president. Joining us via Zoom is our regular pundit, Henry Kobler. Thanks so much, Henry, for joining us here on the marketplace. And we know how US President Donald Trump is a firm believer of crypto. Now, here in Ghana, we are yet to roll out ours, the ECD. How will things be playing out, knowing very well US is one of our major trading partners?
Thank you very much. So as far back as July, Donald would have had a conference where he basically speaks in Nashville, talking about actually setting up a federal Bitcoin reserve and trying to make US the powerhouse for the Bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies. Now, that clearly gives you a very big indication as to how he really wants to influence that. Again, having a billionaire friend, Elon, coming on his campaign trail and him being a very firm believer of cryptocurrency gives you a very clear indication that crypto is now going to sort of take over. And for the US basically to jump on and say that they're going to set up a federal for Bitcoin, that should tell you that that's really going to be big. Again, if your understanding of cryptocurrency comes into play, you'd understand that Bitcoin is actually in limited reserves. And so if they're going to have to start pushing in cryptocurrency, that means that there's going to be a high demand for it, and exactly the point where you're having the value go up. Now, last week when I spoke to Daryl, Bitcoin actually gone to 75,000, which was way before the last 2 weeks conversations which I had with him. It was actually 66,000. Today, we're having Bitcoin go up to 88,000. And so in 2 weeks, you're basically having Bitcoin move from almost about 66,000 to 88,000 in 2 weeks. That should basically give a very clear call to say that this asset really in the financial market and the financial disruption market relatively is going to be a hold on when anybody has to be looking into the crypto market. Now, again, comparatively to the e-currency or the ECD that is supposed to be rolled out, I mean, generally, I've looked at the manifestos for both of the candidates in Ghana, and I can tell you there's really no clear direction in terms of picking up on these cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies. I mean, I've seen the ECD where, I mean, the what do you call it, the MPP basically makes some level of assertion with the ECD. But trust me, ECD is actually a very homegrown solution. But we're looking at an asset which is global. I can give you an example. When I was coming to the US, I was trying to get, I mean, USD in terms of exchange, but the bank could not give me USD. But I had some Bitcoins, which I had saved from behind. But again, by coming to the US, I was able to just go to an ATM and withdraw USD just with Bitcoin, with no restrictions, no level of documentations whatsoever, and all of that. And so you can understand that as much as regulation lags behind, especially in Ghana, where we're not looking at the greater assets, which comes in terms of the major cryptocurrencies that are playing on the market, and we sort of would only focus on the ECD, we're sort of pushing ourselves down. By the time we look at getting into playing, being a player within the space, would have actually just been left behind. Because again, it's not waiting for anybody. It's a global asset. If the US powerhouse relatively sees this as not a threat and would definitely pick it up and start moving with it, I think that we should also be looking in that direction where we're not just focusing on homegrown solutions as the EC only, but we're also looking at the other cryptocurrencies and the blockchain technology itself.
I then guess that we will lose out mainly when it comes to the e-space in terms of e-currency and what have you. How do we navigate our way out and ensure that we know we are at par with them?
I mean, first of all, I'm looking at how policy comes into play and how our policy leaders relatively leads the way in terms of this adoption in the financial sector and the financial markets as well. Again, I'm looking at how the regulators are just coming up. I've seen how, I mean, the EC was being piloted and all of that. I have seen conversations from Bank of Ghana, DBG, from their 3I summit where, I mean, some of these conversations basically have come up, but I'm not seeing a very active contribution, again, because regulation really relatively takes a bit of time. But again, I'm also looking at how this is running. If in 2 weeks an asset moves from 66,000 to 88,000, you can actually assess all the risk and everything. I mean, but if a powerhouse is sort of picking up and saying that we're starting to push up.
That's fine. Thank you so much, Henry Kwabla, one of our pundits here on Let's Talk Tech. Thanks so much for watching Business Life Marketplace for today. I am Pius Kojobaka. Let's connect at 5 for the very latest in the world of business on Business Life. Once again, do visit myjoyonline.com/business. More stories when you log on to that portal.